Fiscal Policy. Presentation by Bailey Monaco. An introduction to aggregate demand. Aggregate demand shows the relationship between real GDP and the price level in the economy. The AD curve has a negative slope, showing that as price level increases, GDP decreases, and vice versa. When the price level changes, it affects a number of different things. First off, it affects consumers' purchasing power. This is known as the wealth effect. It also impacts interest rates paid by consumers and businesses, the interest rate effect. And lastly, it affects the relative prices of domestic goods and services compared to imported goods and services. This is the net export effect. Shifts in aggregate demand. AD is made up of spending by houses, businesses, the government, and other countries. A decrease in AD is shown by a leftward shift of the AD curve from AD to AD2. An increase in AD is shown by a rightward shift from AD to AD1. The curve will shift if there is a change in any of its components: consumption, investment, government spending, or net exports. An introduction to short-run aggregate supply. The short-run aggregate supply curve shows the relationship between real GDP and price level. This positive relationship exists because producers seek to maximize profits, and production costs are often inflexible. Since firms seek to maximize profits, change in the price level will affect the quantity that they produce. When the price level rises but production costs stay the same, firms make more profit on each unit sold, so they increase the quantity that they can produce. Shifts in the short-run aggregate supply curve. The SRAS curve will decrease if firms produce less at any given price level, and then it will increase if firms produce more at any given price level. A rightward shift indicates an increase, while a leftward shift indicates a decrease. The SRAS curve will shift as a result of a number of different things. Changes in input prices, for example, nominal wages, the price of oil, and other natural resources affect the SRAS curve. Changes in productivity, for example, technological advances, also affect the SRAS curve. Now we're going to graph some economic conditions. The first graph we're going to look at demonstrates full employment equilibrium. This graph demonstrates the economy at its prime. It contains three different curves. The first curve is the LRAS, long-run aggregate supply, which in our case is always vertical. Then we have the SRAS, which we've already graphed, and the AD. The intersection of the graph represents an equilibrium in both price level and output. Unemployment is 5%, while CPI is 3%. The next graph demonstrates an economic problem known as a recessionary gap, and it too incorporates the three different curves. We have our LRAS, long-run aggregate supply, our SRAS, short-run aggregate supply, and our AD, aggregate demand. In this case, one of the causes we discussed before leads to a decrease in aggregate demand, a leftward shift. Price level and real GDP decrease. Unemployment is greater than 5%, CPI is less than 3%. In this next graph, we demonstrate yet again another economic problem, an inflationary gap. It too incorporates the three different curves. Again, we have our LRAS, long-run aggregate supply, our SRAS, short-run aggregate supply, and our AD, aggregate demand. In this case, one of the causes we discussed before leads to an increase in aggregate demand, a rightward shift. As a result, price level and real GDP increase. Employment is greater than 5%, while CPI is less than 3%. This last graph is a little bit different. It too demonstrates an economic problem, but this time a stagflationary gap. Again, we have the LRAS, long-run aggregate supply, the SRAS, short-run aggregate supply, and the AD, aggregate demand. But instead of the AD curve shifting, the SRAS curve shifts to the left, a decrease. Price level is high and output is low, and this point of intersection is not where it should be. Unemployment is greater than 5%, while CPI is greater than 3%. So now how does fiscal policy fix all these things? One way is government spending. Government spending increases the demand for goods and services, both things that we need. It also initiates the spending multiplier. The spending multiplier is 1 over MPS. As a result, AD shifts back to the right where it should be. Price level increases, and then GDP also increases. Adjusting taxes is another method of fiscal policy. This changes the disposable income of households or businesses. The tax multiplier is in effect. It is negative MPC over MPS. There are two types of fiscal policy. One is expansionary, which includes a decrease in taxes and an increase in government spending. This type of policy is used to fix a recessionary gap. It does this by increasing aggregate demand. While increasing aggregate demand, the components of aggregate demand also increase. Consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports also increase. The second type of fiscal policy used often is contractionary. This incorporates an increase in taxes and a decrease in government spending. This type of policy is used to fix an inflationary gap. It does this by lowering aggregate demand. Thus, the components of aggregate demand lower as well. Consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports decrease too. As I said before, stagflationary gap is unique, so either policy can be used to fix that problem. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching.